Will Andy Burnham fail? Well, going on the record of the last 10 years, he will fail, and it won't take very long. But it's just got me thinking about who are the prime ministers in the post-war period, so since 1945, who have been successful. Now, the last 6, so all of those since 2016, have been failures, I think, incontrovertibly. I think Ted Heath was a failure. Anthony Eden was a failure. But then you have another category of prime ministers who did okay. I think Churchill as a peacetime prime minister did okay. Macmillan did okay. Harold Wilson kept a lid on things which exploded very soon after he left office. I think Blair did all right domestically. Obviously, the debacle of Iraq stained his premiership. And Brown did okay, and Brown did okay as well. He wasn't in office for very long. So that really just leaves 2 who were outstanding and successful, and who left a legacy in each case, with which we still which still shapes the country in which we live, and they are of course Clement Attlee and Margaret Thatcher. Now, they are very different philosophically, very different politically, very different in temperament. They are, and very different in physical appearance, but they are quite similar in their social cultural background. That lower middle class, devout, Attlee from a very devout Anglican home, Margaret Thatcher from a Methodist background, and remained devout throughout her life. But what they also have in common, and I think that, and this is really what we want to get to, they have a very clear and powerful program that they intend to push through. And they have a significant intellectual hinterland, philosophical hinterland, on which they are able to draw for their policy to justify, to shape, to sharpen, to focus their policy ideas. Now let's just think a little bit about that. Let's just go first with Attlee. So Attlee. I'd start with Leonard Trelawney Hobhouse. Hobhouse, not terribly well known these days, but he was very big at the time, and it was Hobhouse who kind of pointed out, contra to say James Stuart Mill, that individual freedom was dependent, had a prior dependence, as it were, on healthcare, employment, home, education. If you didn't have those things, then you weren't really free in any meaningful way, and you weren't really in a position to make robust and ethical decisions. So it was important to provide those social, cultural, economic supports for each individual in order to allow that person to lead a flourishing and productive and satisfying and useful life. So that Hobhouse was the justification there. Then, of course, you had John Maynard Keynes, who was enormously influential at the peak of his reputation as an economics advisor, and the success of his theories, his ideas had been played out through the Second World War, when huge state intervention and state management had shown how powerful it could be. So you have that, as I say, that hinterland, that background on which Attlee is able to draw. And you think of Mrs. Thatcher. She has Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman is the man who wrote the book on monetarism, who explained the Great Depression. Then you have Friedrich Hayek, who is a little bit like Keynes and was very close to Keynes personally, no, not politically or philosophically. but Hayek, who was a kind of philosopher, economist, and very strong on the principles and the necessity of individual liberty, and then for Mrs. Thatcher you have Keith Joseph, who is able to draw on these ideas. Arthur Laffer was another one. Isaiah Berlin here in the UK, Karl Popper. So there was a real group of collective. Probably not a word that they would like. There was a hive of these great minds who were supporting and feeding what Mrs. Thatcher was doing. Now, I think in terms of their circumstances, they were again very, very different. Attlee comes to power in I think September, October 1945, so very shortly after VJ Day, shortly after the victory in Japan. And he has at his disposal a nation that has probably never been more unified before or since. The war had been, I'm not going to say popular because it wasn't, I would hope that no war is ever popular, but it had immense popular support, and the fact that Britain had led the world through this very dark and threatening and difficult time, and led the world through to success. This really gave a lot of confidence and buoyancy and enthusiasm to provide for a unified nation. Margaret Thatcher was in the, as I was saying, in the opposite situation. She had a very divided country, so she has the unions on one side. She has the kind of the aspiring middle classes on the other side, and they politically worked in two different ways relative to those circumstances. So Attlee is able to bring together a kind of a cabinet of all the talents with people who are from the right of the party, like Stafford Cripps, to people who are very much on the left of the party, like Anya and Bevan. Whereas Margaret Thatcher she goes with the division. She cuts out the wets. She got rid of Pym. She gets rid of Heseltine. She gets rid of anybody who doesn't agree with her and is not going to support and follow her. Follow her lead. But it's the program. It's the power and the clarity of the program that allows Attlee to hold together these big conflicting personalities, and that allows Margaret Thatcher to simply cut out people who, however popular or however popular they may be, if they're not fitting in with the program that she's pursuing. And if you think back on the last 6 prime ministers, and every one of them are, a failure to the point of comedy, none of them have a program. None of them have that hinterland of philosophical or political or economic thought on which to draw, on which to create their policies. And if you think across the spectrum as it exists now, Zach Polanski, other than spouting on about Gaza, which I dare say a lot of people would feel, and I would even be sympathetic to the point that it needs to be spouted on about, or just kind of, or the kind of super wokeness that he wants to almost go back to. It's almost sort of a reaction against the reaction. Or on the other side, Rupert Lowe. I mean, are we really going to start deporting hundreds of thousands of people? I hope not. Farage, what does Farage actually believe in as a positive thing? What's he going to do for healthcare? What's he going to do for housing? What's he going to do for education? I'm sure he's got his sound bites on all of those things, and glug glug glug, puff puff puff. He'll make it all sound very very chummy and so on. Kemi Badenoch, I think, is a very skillful and effective politician, but again, I'm not seeing where her revolutionary ideas are coming from. And Andy Burnham. Let's think about Andy Burnham for a moment, since he is the man who is about to walk through the door. Devolution, fair enough. I think we're over centralised. That's something that Margaret Thatcher was at fault for. She didn't like local authorities who tended to be run by parties other than her own. So she sort of kneecapped them, if that's an acceptable expression. So devolution, yeah, that's fair enough. And he says homes are to be the priority, which again I think is right. And I think a lot of our current problems arise from our lack of adequate, affordable housing. The economy of loneliness, the collapse in the fertility rate, the fragmentation of the social fragmentation, the social isolation, the sense, particularly among men, of being unable to make an adequate contribution to be able to provide for a family. Our dependence on the two-income household, which is killing us in many ways. And I think, as Burnham says quite rightly, everything starts from a good home, and we're not. As things are, we are not providing good homes particularly to people of childbearing age, and so they're not forming households. They're not having families. They're not living. In my view, they're not having the potential or the opportunity to live to experience what are surely, I would think, some of the most profound and satisfying and challenging aspects of human social life. So, but his issue is, of course, that okay, that's all very well, blah blah blah, but we've got a 4% running deficit on the public sector finances and 110% debt. So where is he going to get? Where's he going to get the money? And if we just go back again to Attlee, of course, comes in with 200% debt. So don't. So in a way, Burnham's got it easy. Attlee comes in with 200% debt. He also comes in with a fairly good running budget. He's got the demobilisation is reducing expenses very rapidly. He's got loans from sort of relatively cheap loans from the United States. The Marshall Plan is about to come in. So in terms of his kind of working income, he's kind of okay. But this is something which is kind of forgotten a little bit about when you come to Attlee's government, and how they were able to build hundreds and hundreds of thousands of fantastic homes. And I live in a home that was built at that time, in a council flat in the East End that was built at that time, and it's a fantastic piece of work. I just cannot praise it highly enough. It's solid and it's warm and it's spacious, and it's got a little park to look out on. We've got a plaque where Aneurin Bevan himself came to cut the ribbon to set the people free. Really fantastic work that they did. But as I was saying before about the spirit of national unity that Attlee had to ride on, basic rate of tax, 45%. Purchase tax, anything from 16 1/3% through 33 1/3%, 66 2/3% to 100% on almost everything other than food. So very high indirect taxes. If you died with an estate worth £1 million, death duties took half of it, 50%, and then you were even less than that, and you were still getting hit quite hard with that. 45%, as I mentioned, basic rate of income tax, top marginal rate of income tax, notoriously, famously, 98%. So that national unity gave us the willingness to pay very high rates of tax, to work collectively, work as a nation, to provide for ourselves, and to provide for our future. Burnham does not have that right now. He has a highly fragmented, highly polarised electorate. He's got to deal with this, multicultural society, which there is just anything but unity in the present situation, in the present circumstances of the United Kingdom or of any of the Western democracies. There's a loss in the same way that Attlee had confidence and enthusiasm in his electorate. I think Burnham, you've got, you think half the electorate prefers the system, or so they say, that prefers Iran to Western democracy. There's a complete crisis of confidence in the actual value of Western democracy at all. So if you don't really believe in Western democracy, if you really want to march up and down the street shouting that to save Iran, save Iran in its present state of daily televised executions and massacres on the street, and we don't want to go too much down all of that pathway. But this lack of confidence, this lack in who we are and what our purpose is and what it is we should be, where we are on the world stage. Whereas, again, as I was saying earlier, for Attllee, Britain, that self-confidence, that Britain had led the world through to victory, to a great moral victory as much as to a great military victory. All of that is gone. And as much as he's right to specify, the housing is where it's all is, good homes is where it all starts. Where is the program? Where are the philosophical roots? Where are the star economists? Where are the star sociologists to understand, to give us a sense that this is not just another professional politician swinging into number 10, coming up with a few cool sound bites, wears a nice t-shirt, kind of cool guy, up for what likes to watch England, play. You see what you understand what I mean. We had charismatic. Boris Johnson's pretty charismatic. He's smart and a smart guy. Underneath all of that clowning around, he's a pretty smart character. Rishi Sunak was very decent, very technically competent. Starmer, again, I think came in on being not being Boris Johnson, came in on the idea of being someone who was going to be decent and honest and so on. And really, that's why he kept U-turning, because he didn't have a program. It's just even getting the policy right is not in itself sufficient. So I think on the one hand we have to wish Burnham well. We have to put our shoulders to the wheel. We have to, as always, live within the law and pay our taxes, and hope that things do in fact work out.